Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're listening to me from. My name is Shola Bulu. I'm the principal consultant of Shola Bulu and Associates, and I'm here to do a short presentation. I'm hoping I can do it in 15 minutes thereabouts or less. And I'm going to be talking about the 10 basic skills that a highly effective public sector communicator should have. And the purpose of this session really is to just share my thoughts around, focusing on public sector communications, because in the month of June 2025, we're focusing on public sector communications, policy communications, and political communication. So this is just that. And what you would notice is that a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing is also applicable to other sectors, private sector, whatever. But I'm situating it in public sector just for that contextualization. And of course, the examples I'll be giving are all public sector. But if you are working in NGO or private or any other, please listen ahead, because I think these are skills that are useful for everybody. The reason why, you would see the 10 skills that I put together. I put it together because I had public sector in mind. For some other sectors, or businesses within a sector, you may need maybe 4 or 5 of them or more. But in public sector, you really need a broad scale of skills. In big companies and organizations too as well. So if you're a company that is a conglomerate, you're working for a big conglomerate like maybe Dangote Group, a lot of what I'm saying here will apply to you. If you're working for an international institution as well as a communicator, communications lead, professional, or whatever, it will apply to you. If you want to work in a international organization, World Health Organization, or whatever, or NGO, this is also relevant. So just look at it with that context. But I'm situating it very much in public sector context, but it doesn't mean that if you're not in the public sector, you cannot listen to this as well, and this would not benefit you. So let's get right into it. Let me just check my. So let's get to the first one. Okay, so for you to be number one, to be basic skills that are highly effective. Remember, we're talking about highly effective public sector communicators now, not just people who do their job anyhow. You're highly effective. Number one, you must have a communication strategy. You must have communication strategy and planning skills. In other words, you know how to develop a communication strategy. That's a given. You know how to develop an integrated media and communication strategy. You know the difference between internal and external communications. You know how to use data. You know the importance of communications research, because if you do not have data about the audience that you want to speak to, who are you communicating to? You also know how to use analytics to get, to check your platforms, what are people saying and all of that, insights from social listening and all of that. You know how to develop key performance indicators to know whether you have achieved your objectives. You understand the strategic communications framework. I should really have added that here, really, because that's very important. You also understand stakeholder management principles and things like that. I think I should just add that in while we're at it. So you understand the stakeholder management framework, and you understand how to use the strategic communications framework. And if any of these things I'm saying is not familiar to you, then apart from the fact that I would highly recommend that you attend some of our courses that talk about that, where we teach some of these things, but you really need to know about these things to be able to function well as a highly effective public sector communicator in the 21st century. It's very important because you have to know how to work that whole strategic communications framework. You need to know that communications is not just about, oh, let's do a banner, let's put up this front, let's go to the media. You have to start from who is the audience, what is the outcome, how do we know if we're successful, what do you want them to know, what do you want them to feel about us, what do you want them to do after this, who are we targeting and why, what kind of platform should we choose based on our knowledge of the stakeholder, what are they saying, what are their expectations from us. You have to be able to take that step-by-step view. Because today, communications is not a joke. It's not something you do just by chance or just for the sake of communicating. The kind of backlash we've seen in the public sector recently from things that people have done just without thinking about the sensitivities has been phenomenal. In fact, from over the last 2-3 months, it's like one misstep to the other in the Nigerian context. And we're also seeing internationally as well, but I will talk about Nigeria because that's close to me and that's what I'm familiar with. We've seen so many. We are seeing at the federal level, we're seeing at state government level, we're seeing at federal parastatal level. So, and all of it is communications missteps. So there's a real challenge here. So, and it's about people not really understanding communications risk. That's another thing I would put in there, but let me just not add that again. Not really understanding communications risk, and then not not factoring it in and just going ahead. Let's just say just not understanding, not being able to apply the strategic communications framework, which also talks about, makes you think about not just communicating, but if I communicate, what will happen? What will people say? Will they have, will they see things the way I see it? How can I make sure that I achieve what I want and not just be communicating for the sake of communicating? And of course, if you are communicating for public sector, the risk is very high, much higher than private sector, I would say. Private sector, the risk is mostly about money and all of that, which, you can resolve, however. But public sector, there may be a national risk. It may turn out, it may set communities against one another. It's a risk that, because a private sector, if you communicate something that causes problem, it is contained within your company to a very large extent. But for public sector, it has impact on a broad section of citizens, depending on what it is. If it's a health sector, communications agent, health sector, parastatal or institution, a miscommunication can put out panic in the entire population. So it's not just about you and your maybe 1,000 people in your institution, or 2,000 or 5,000. It then becomes about the 20 million in the state or the 200 million in the country. So the risk for public sector is much higher. So for me, I believe that there's a bigger premium on public sector to really get their acts right. They should actually be leading the way on strategic communication. Private sector and non-profit should be learning at the feet of the public sector. It should not be the other way around, because the communications risk in public sector is much bigger than it is anywhere else. So another highly effective a skill that a highly effective public sector communicator should have. You should have public relations, media, community, and stakeholder management skills. You must know the whole spectrum of public relations. Yes, you have to know that. Publicity, advertising, how to build relationships with people, stakeholder consultation. You must know how to develop a PR plan, for either the public office holder, the leader of your public office, public sector institution, or for government, or at a federal level. You must know how to do a publicity plan, mass communications, advertising, outdoor, indoor. You must know all of that. And it must be also strategic, not just putting banners out there for the sake of, oh, let's just do banner. That time has passed. You must understand strategic public relations as well, how to do community engagement and relationship building. This is very important for public sector communications, because again, a lot of the communications they're going to be doing is, some will be grassroots communication. So communications to the grassroots, different from communication to white collars, to executives, to high net worth individuals, to students, to youth groups, to women, and all of that. So how you sort of build your programs around that in a structured way, making sure that there's consistency in your approach, regardless of the audience you're dealing with, all of that, you should be able to do that. You should have the skills to do that. Of course, media relation skills have to be very top notch. You need to understand the media landscape. You need to be able to know who are the major players, print, TV stations, the platforms that you need to be at. You need to understand how the media works, how the newsroom works, and also how social media is getting into the space. You need to understand that. And I think a lot of public sector officials understand this. It's just that the way they use the media, I see more negative use of the media than positive use of the media. So it's more around trying to control the narrative, trying to stifle independent social media conversation, rather than trying to engage constructively and trying to use narrative and communications tools and expertise to either shift the narrative, or to persuade, or to convince, or to engage. There's just not enough of that. And it's all in the negative space, too, in my mind, mostly. But there are some people who, there's some shining lights within the public sector who take a different approach. And, when we see such examples, they are notable as well. So social media management skill, very important for you to be a very effective public sector communicator. You must have social media management skills. You must know the different channels and platforms. Or you cannot afford to say, oh, it's only Facebook, or no Twitter, no WhatsApp, no TikTok. Public sector, you must be everywhere. You have to have a strategy for all platforms. And of course, the more, depending on how big your agency or your institution or your office is, you have to make sure that everywhere your citizens are, everywhere your constituents are, every platform where they are, you need to be there as well. your messaging must be able to get that. So you must have audience intelligence, you must know your audience. This audience part, and you can see I'm really trying to go fast over a lot of things because there's so much to talk about. Each of these can be one day of content all on its own, but let's just walk through because, you know, we don't have all that much time. So audience intelligence is very key. I think many public sector communicators, they don't do this audience mapping very well, which is why a lot of their communications faces backlash because they read it as though they're writing, they write as though they are writing to themselves. So they read it and it sounds okay to them. Yeah, this is what I want to say. This makes sense to me. It's my perspective. They're not reading it with the eyes of the other person and thinking about the people who are going to be this and say, if somebody from this kind of background listens to this, what would they think? What would they say? If I'm writing about students and education and I'm rolling out a policy, I'm trying to explain something that happened, what would the parents think about what they're saying? What I'm saying, what would the students think? What would, you know, that sort of audience intelligence is lacking. So understanding how digital communities operate, that's another thing that makes many of the social media backlash on social media, particularly in crisis management situations. There are some digital communities that already exist. They are known. They have their ideologies and they have the way they think. And if they are very active on a platform that you are putting out a messaging on, then you need to make sure that whatever it is they're going to say is robust enough to be able to tackle whatever comes from some of those digital communities. And I think also there's a lot that needs to be learned in that space. I can't go too much into that. Social media listening, also, you need to be able to understand how to listen in on social media, the tools that you can use for that. Data insights, gathering and analysis, you need to understand that as well. How you can use, and there's a lot of AI tools, there's Brand24, there's so many things that you can use to get this running really well for you. But your ability to even use what is coming through and use it to make decisions and refine your strategy, that will be very important. Community management, how to manage the community on your space. I see a lot of social media pages on public sector, they don't do this very well. The community management is poor. I think the last time we had a good community manager on social media, at least on Twitter, for a public sector agency in Nigeria was one EFCC handler many years ago. He managed the community so well that he literally brought everybody, people started following that page. Even though it's an agency that, you know, people love to hate, you know what I mean? But he was able to make it an engaging and even funny place to be on, and, you know, to talk about serious things in a playful way. He managed the community very well. And since then, they've not been able to get anybody like that. And there hasn't been any other page, I would say, on public sector in Nigeria that I've seen manage their community well on social media. And for me, the fact that we've actually seen someone do that, I wonder why others haven't tried to follow that tone. Since then, that same agency, they've gone the other way completely. So I don't follow them anymore. Because everything that comes through is not yeah, anyway. So social media issues and crisis management, again, you need to know how to manage social media issues. There's a lot of missteps in this space at state level. There's just a lot of things, and for me as a communications professional, it's disheartening because I know that these are such easy mistakes that could have been avoidable mistakes. And I see that is a lack of understanding that makes these things happen. So your effectiveness as a public sector communicator will be affected if you do not have the knowledge to help you know how to navigate the line mines, how to choose your words carefully. Words are important. You cannot just say anything anyhow. And unfortunately on social media, when you're writing very small blurbs, it's very easy to be misunderstood. So you have to really be careful about how you're arranging what you're saying so that people don't misinterpret you and don't now have one big backlash. There's just a lot. But anyway, to understand the social media landscape and how to manage your stakeholders. We're running out of time. So brand management skills, this is very important. Now, this one, I believe that a lot of public sector communicators do not really understand that they have a brand to protect. They have a brand to manage. So if you're working for, let's say, Water Corporation, there is a brand, Lagos State Water Corporation, Federal Ministry of Water or whatever. That brand, you need to manage that brand. So how visible is the brand? How are you promoting the work of the brand? How is the brand showing presence, before its constituents within the people of Nigeria, whoever it's supposed to be serving? How is it positioned? How is it differentiated? Does anybody even recognize that this your public sector agency exists? Do you understand? So I don't get that sense, because when we in the private sector are promoting a brand, we're very intentional about it. We're intentional about how that brand is positioned, how it's promoted, how it's engaged, how it's perceived, how it communicates, the touch points. We're very intentional. I don't see that in the public sector, to be honest. I don't see it. I think they just believe that the fact that they're the government just gives them like, yeah, we are government, we are this. It's not enough. It's not enough. And then so they get surprised when they now find people, social media conversation is negative on certain issues. Yes, because we don't have anything. We don't have any affinity to your brand. So yes, anything the negative that comes up, the conversation is going to be negative and people are going to dump on you because there is no sense of affinity. Like I said, in the private sector, this affinity is built. Nobody takes it for granted that you will have brand affinity just like that. You make it happen. But I don't see that happening in the public sector space. Why? So to be a highly effective public sector communicator, you need to really, really work on building that brand, positioning the brand, determining what the brand is, developing a brand story, brand narrative, pushing it out, and making sure that everything that that institution or agency or parastatal does lines up with the brand strategy. So again, content strategy and management skills again. So how do you tell your story? How do you tell it visually? How do you use content creatively to tell your story? How are you targeting? Who are you targeting? Are you targeting correctly? And there's some stories that you need to tell with videos visually. There's some stories, infographics. I see very little use of infographics, and I wonder why. Because infographics work with statistics and numbers. It can, in public sector, is very important because numbers are key. So if you tell me, for instance, you gave out 500,000 books to local or build, you said you gave out 500,000 books to schools in underprivileged areas. That's something that I can hold on to. Or these are the number of employment opportunities you created over a period of time. How many people are on payroll? All sorts of those kind of number statistics. I find out that nobody is telling those stories in public sector. So we are unable to quantify the volume or the impact of the work that you are doing. And it's very important. Like I said, private sector, we don't joke with numbers. We will tell you, yes, this is how many. I mean, you can see Dangote, a group in Nigeria, they imported 4,000 CNG trucks. They made sure they put that figure out there. And I remembered it. I didn't even plan to say it. It's not on my slides. But that number came out of my head. Why? Because I've seen it everywhere. 4,000 CNG trucks. I don't know what the CNG trucks are going to do. I really don't know who is going to, do you understand? I don't know how that 4,000 relates with the value chain and the importance of it. But I know that he has bought out 4,000 CNG trucks. So private sector uses those numbers to tell their story. Of course, they showed us the picture of the trucks. I mean, some of the trucks coming out. But then they also put that number out there. So we need to see more of that as well. And this is, by the way, I mean, that example I gave is the approach they've taken to communication has really helped their brand a lot. They are really doing a lot of tell and show. They don't just show, but they tell. And in the telling, they're using numbers, they use statistics, they use visuals. If they need to show you props, they show you props. They're really engaging with all your five senses. Make sure you hear, make sure you see, make sure you touch as much as possible. That's the way to do communication. And you can see they are working, there's a strategy that they are moving towards. It's not just about being present. I think public sector communications is very haphazard generally. I do not see a structured approach. And unfortunately, in the past, it didn't matter because all you just needed to do is be in office, run out your tenure, make sure you do events and activities and nobody is asking you any question. But now the game is changing. People are beginning to ask questions. Citizens are beginning to get involved. They're talking. They're creating a lot of noise that is drawing attention to things. So the incentive to communicate and be more structured in your communication, just to prevent drama from coming your way, is becoming more. So for you to be highly effective in this kind of space now, where social media conversation is going up, citizens are getting more engaged, you also need to have issues and crisis management skills. You have to know how to respond, how not analyze, know how the sentiment is around the conversation, and therefore know what you should or should not do. Again, like I said, we continue to see examples of this. I mean, just yesterday, there was, this thing that came out on social media where there was crisis in a particular part of Nigeria, and, the president is supposed to make a visit, and then we see some memos framing the conversation as though, just giving the impression that the level of seriousness that should have been attached to that visit was being seen as ceremonial, whereas it was supposed to be mediation, peace building, or even, how would I say, issues management. It was supposed to be a crisis management visit. And you are now almost, you are writing, we see narrative that makes it look like, from your perspective, it's a ceremonial visit. And there's nothing ceremonial about the context. So it took the public backlash. So sorry, I need to. So I'm almost out of time now. So so just knowing what to say and what not to say in a crisis is very, very important. I'm going to wrap this up now. And then finally, reputation management skills. So again, I talked about this importance of managing reputation, knowing what to say and what not to say, telling and showing, actions and words matching up. I think this is so important. In public sector communications, I do not see that people really understand that actions and your words have to match up, and that you need to do evidence-based communication that is independently verifiable. If you say we are commissioning this project, or we have distributed packs of sanitation kits to 10,000 or 1 million households, people should be able to check. It should be obvious to everybody that really you have reached 1 million households. You cannot just be pushing out information that nobody can verify. Again, I'm saying a highly skilled public sector, a communicator, will know. If you find yourself in a setting where people want, when messaging comes to you, you'll be challenging the content. Are you sure? Is this verifiable? You won't just go to town with anything that is brought to you. You will push back. So you will also have a structured and thematic approach to managing reputation, responsive, inclusive. You will have a theme. This is another thing that I think that is missing in public sector communication. I don't even know what many of the public sector agencies stand towards. I mean, I know in Nigeria, for instance, the Nigerian police tried to do something like that, where they said police is your friend, but unfortunately, they did not back it up. All they did was they just made posters saying police is your friend. And they actually seeded it out and everybody understood. This was like years ago, decades ago, I think about 10 years ago. But then that police is your friend was not practicalized, was not operationalized. So you see what I mean about evidence-based. So because the communication did not have any root in actual performance, there was nothing friendly about the behavior. The behaviors did not change. The performance did not change. So just putting communication and saying police is your friend, launching a campaign, and then you're not backing it up with action, it didn't fly. So that campaign died a natural death. Of course, I'm sure they will have spent money because they did a lot of the communications and everybody heard, but in actual performance, and it didn't change their reputation in any way. So that's the point here. To be a highly skilled public sector communicator, if you really want to build and manage reputation, you make sure that you are communicating things that there's evidence to show, and that you are using themes that will resonate with the audience that you are targeting. So if you have questions for me, please just put it in the comments, because like I said, I'm breezing through this so that I can make this short and sharp for anybody that wants to listen and watch. And like I said, a lot of this is helpful whether you're in public sector or not. So visual storytelling skills, I've talked about this a lot, human stories, use of infographics, I talked about that earlier, creative content. Now, these days you have short videos, faceless videos, on-site, outdoor, and every platform has its, YouTube, you can do your long form videos, you can do your shorts, Instagram has reels, you have short form and long form options, you have stories, you have posts, use everything. Use it very well, particularly but public sector, like I said, you need this more than every other person. Watch how the influencers and other people are doing it and use those tactics as well. Because you too, the public sector communicator, you too have to be an influencer. You have to be able to influence people positively and constructively towards governance, towards citizen rights and well-being, and and all of that. So you have to also have excellent as an effective communicator in the public sector. And I would say this applies also everywhere, every sector you find yourself. You must have excellent messaging and writing skills. The hallmark of a communicator, in fact, I always tell people, if you're not sure whether you're a PR person or you're a communications person, if you don't like writing, sorry, you are not a communications person, and you can never be a communications person, because the communications person is somebody that should like writing, should be in love with words. You like to read, you like to write, you like to meditate upon words, reflect upon words, you like to express yourself in words, orally and in written. You are somebody that you can write a speech. They can wake you up at night. You can write a statement. You can write a speech. You can write a commentary. You have opinions about things, and you are very open about sharing it. Even if you may not share it orally, but you can write it down. You can express it. You can articulate things. You can simplify things. You are a wordsmith. I've never seen anybody who is effective in communications who doesn't have this number 9. I put them at the back because they are the more personal skills. For me, this is even foundational. Before you start talking about communications strategy and all of that, this is the starting point. This is even the screening criteria for me to even know whether are you, is communication suited for you or not. Now, this number 10, I struggle to put this here because for other practice areas, I would say public speaking may not be so important. It's important for all communicators because even when you are presenting your communication strategy, if you cannot speak to your board, you can't address them, you can't convince them, you can't persuade. When they're asking you questions, they're challenging you, you cannot respond. That's an issue. Because most of the time, we have to first advocate for the position that we are taking. Like when an issue comes up, this person will say, no, go at them, let's go to the media. And then you are the one telling them, no, let's not handle it that way. Even if we're going to respond, it's like this, So you have to be able to speak up. So, but then public speaking is not as necessary like to a large crowd. I know a lot of communicators who are very good in their job in private sector and they hardly do public speaking other than presentation, and all that within their organization. They don't do external public speaking and it's not required of you. But you must have executive presence to some extent to be effective in this job. People that don't have executive presence and it's very difficult for you to lead as a public sector communications official because if you cannot stand up and everybody's eyes is looking on you and you're able to command your presence and speak, public sector, you will struggle as a communicator because in public sector, you cannot only be staying in the office and writing messages. There are times you will have to speak at events and also on camera and all of that. So again, that is as you go senior, the junior people, but there are times you need to weigh in. So, I think this will be, for public sector, I would say yes. In other sectors, I would say public speaking, not so much. But I think that is, if you are going to public sector, don't wait for the day when they put microphone in your mouth and then they now realize that, oh my goodness, you cannot speak. So if you're planning public sector, NGO, major institutions, I would say work on your public speaking, executive presence, oratory skills in front of large and small crowds, whether indoor, outdoor, virtual, or in person, scheduled and unscheduled. In fact, that unscheduled is the most important one you must have, because literally in those spaces, they will just throw microphone in your face without notice. And you have to be able to stay on message, know what you can say, maintain your composure, speak respectfully to the audiences, know who is in the room and how you gauge and compose yourself in that space, and then do what you need to do. And yeah, so I hope, so that's my list of 10 basic skills that I think a highly effective public sector communicator should have. I hope this has been useful for you. I would like to hear your comments as well. Please share if you think this is useful for yourself or anyone else. And I see you on my next video. And please like and subscribe as well. So till the next time, thank you and bye-bye.